I'll never forget the sound of her laugh that night. It wasn't just a laugh. It was hers. That signature, melodic laugh I used to think was reserved only for me. But there she was, my wife of 7 years, laughing with him at the party like I didn't exist. The music was loud, the people louder, and yet that laugh cut through it all. Sharp, cold, unmistakable. We'd been invited to a coworker's engagement party. She told me it'd be good for us to mingle, to let loose, to reconnect with old friends. I was hesitant. Things had already been strained. She'd been distant, glued to her phone, and always working late. I chalked it up to stress. That's what a supportive husband does, right? You make excuses for them when the truth is too ugly to face. I got there late that night because I stayed back to finish something for work. She had gone ahead. I texted her, told her I was on the way. No response. Figured she was busy catching up with people. When I arrived, I scanned the room expecting to see her looking for me, but she wasn't. Instead, I spotted her in the far corner, sitting too close to a man I didn't recognize. A tall guy, maybe early 40s, confident, well-dressed in that smug kind of way. She had her hand on his arm and her head thrown back as she laughed at something he said. I stopped in my tracks. My heart was pounding, not from rage, but from disbelief. She hadn't even noticed me yet. And honestly, part of me wished she never would. I could have walked away, turned around, and left. But I didn't. Instead, I slowly made my way through the crowd, weaving between tipsy coworkers and fake smiles, gripping the small box I had in my coat pocket. I had brought it for her. It was supposed to be a surprise, a token of love, a reminder that I was still fighting for us even when she wasn't. It was a necklace, custom-made, simple but meaningful. It had a small gold plate with the date we first kissed engraved on it. I had planned to give it to her when the night felt right. I thought maybe we could have a moment. Maybe she'd see I was still here, still trying. But as I stood there, just a few feet behind her, I realized I'd been trying alone. That's when she finally noticed me. Her head turned slightly and her eyes met mine. And that smile, that damn smile she had plastered across her face, disappeared in an instant like someone yanked the curtain off her performance. Her whole body stiffened. Her hand dropped from his arm. I didn't say a word. I just stood there watching, holding the necklace box, placing it quietly on the nearby table. She didn't move. He turned to look at me, confused. Then he smirked. Smirked like he knew something I didn't, like he had won something he hadn't earned. But that's the thing, he hadn't won. Not yet. He didn't know who I was. He didn't know what I had already uncovered 2 nights earlier. And he sure as hell didn't know I had planted a tracker under the passenger seat of her car. Yeah, I had my suspicions, but that night, that laugh, that was the confirmation I didn't want but needed. I walked out without a word. I didn't storm off. I didn't make a scene. I just let the silence speak. Because when the truth is heavy enough, you don't need to shout. But this wasn't over. Not even close. I wasn't going to fight for her anymore. I was going to find out just how deep this went. And when I did, they wouldn't be laughing anymore. I didn't go home after leaving the party. Instead, I parked on the other side of town in a dimly lit gas station lot. Engine off, silence thick. I sat in my car for over an hour, staring at the tiny blinking dot on my phone screen. Her location. It was moving. She hadn't gone home either. She was heading west toward the Lakeside District, a part of the city we never had reason to visit together. I watched the dot settle at an address I didn't recognize. A townhouse complex, clean, upscale, and way out of our price range. I zoomed in. Apartment 3C. I could have gone there immediately, but I didn't. I waited. Tracked her again the next morning. Same location, midday, afternoon, evening. It wasn't just a one-night slip. This was a second life, a hidden one. While I stayed home thinking she was working overtime, she was what? Playing house with the stranger, laughing in other rooms, wearing that same perfume I used to trace down her neck before we fell asleep. Couldn't sleep that night. I lay in our bed, staring at the ceiling, the weight of betrayal pressing against my chest. She got home around 2 a.m., crept in like a teenager after curfew. I didn't move, didn't say a word. She slipped under the covers and lay on her side, back to me. I listened to her breathing, slow and steady, like she hadn't just shattered something sacred. I wanted to ask her everything, but I wasn't ready to hear the answers. Not yet. The next day, I made a call to someone I never thought I'd speak to again. Eli Morgan, an old friend from college who became a private investigator after serving in the military. We hadn't spoken in years, but I knew if anyone could find out what she was hiding, it was him. I need surveillance. Discreet. I want to know who he is, where she goes, everything. Eli didn't ask questions, just gave me a date and time to meet. 3 days later, I had a manila folder in my hands that made my stomach twist. Photos, timestamp logs, hotel check-ins, grocery store visits, even a shot of her sitting on a park bench, laughing with him again, her head on his shoulder. Not once, not twice, but over the course of 4 weeks. For weeks of staged excuses, fake fights, cold kisses, and I'm just tired. His name was Carson Redd, divorced, 2 kids in another state. He worked in real estate and had a history of dating married women. Eli found 2 other names, 2 other marriages broken. He was a repeat offender, a ghost that slid through the cracks of decency. And now he had my wife. But what hit me hardest wasn't just the betrayal. It was how ordinary it had all become. She had turned our life into background noise. Our dinners, our inside jokes, the song we played on repeat in the car during our first road trip. It was all just static now. I stared at one photo longer than the rest. It was of her exiting the townhouse one afternoon. She looked happy, like nothing had ever been wrong, like I didn't exist, like our marriage had already died and no one told me I'd missed the funeral. But there was something else, too. She wasn't wearing her wedding ring. That ring was the only thing she said she'd never take off. I remember her words. Even when I'm mad at you, I'll still wear it. It's my anchor. Apparently, anchors get cut loose, too. I didn't cry. Couldn't. I just felt hollow. But underneath the numbness, something else began to rise. Not rage, clarity. I wasn't going to confront her in anger. I wasn't going to beg or plead. I wasn't even going to ask her why. I was going to end it on my terms. Calm, precise, controlled. And it started with an invitation. A small party I planned myself. Just close friends, some of hers, some of mine, even a few coworkers who had probably heard whispers but never imagined they were true. The theme, second chances. And she had no idea that the final chapter of her double life was about to be written in front of an audience. Inviting her to the party felt surreal. I watched her read the invitation I left in the kitchen, handwritten, simple. It said, "Let's reconnect. Just us and a few friends. Friday, 7 p.m. No pressure, just memories." She paused while reading it, then gave me a sideways glance. Not suspicious, just cautious. "Really?" she asked. "After everything lately?" I smiled gently. "Yeah, I think we need it." She agreed faster than I expected. Maybe she felt guilty. Maybe she thought I was finally giving up the coldness and chasing her again. Or maybe, and more likely, she thought she could still have both lives and keep them from colliding. But I was done playing naive. I spent the next 4 days preparing, not just for the party, but for the truth. I invited the right people, mutual friends who knew her, friends who had noticed the distance between us but never said anything. The types who watched quietly from the sidelines. Her coworker Lisa, who once caught her whispering with Carson near the parking garage. Her cousin Theo, who always gave me strange looks at family dinners like he knew something I didn't. And then I invited Carson, but not directly. Eli helped me get his email from a fake account. I sent a note. "Friday, 7 p.m. bring a bottle. She'll be thrilled." I knew he wouldn't resist. He was arrogant, confident. He didn't see me as a threat. He probably thought she was ready to make things official, to introduce him to our circle. These types never think they're walking into a trap. They think the world owes them another woman. The night of the party, I dressed clean but casual. I didn't want to look dramatic or bitter. I wanted to look exactly how I felt. Done, calm, free. The house was spotless. Candles lit, soft music playing. Guests started arriving, unaware that anything unusual was about to happen. She came in around 7:15, dressed in that red wine-colored dress I had always loved. Her hair was curled the way she wore it on our honeymoon. She looked radiant, false but radiant. "Wow," she said. "You really went all out." I smiled. "Only for you." She moved around the room gracefully, greeting people, hugging Lisa, laughing softly with Theo, pretending like we were okay, pretending like she wasn't walking on a minefield. At 7:46, Carson walked in, and everything changed. He paused at the door, surprised by the crowd. He looked at her, then at me. She turned and her face dropped. Not fear, not panic, just confusion. Then came the fear. You could almost hear the gears in her head grinding to life, trying to process what was happening, why he was here, and why I wasn't reacting. I walked over to Carson. "Hey," I said. "Glad you could make it." He looked around. "I thought this was just a private gathering." "Nah, it's a celebration of truth." He squinted. "What the hell's going on?" I didn't answer. I walked to the center of the room and gently tapped my glass. Conversations died. The music faded as someone turned the volume down. "I just want to thank you all for coming tonight," I began. "This gathering is about something important. Second chances. Not just the ones we give, but the ones we take when we think no one's watching." Some people looked around nervously. Others were confused. She stood frozen, lips pressed together. "I learned something recently," I continued, "that sometimes the people you love most can make you feel the most invisible. You give them everything. Time, trust, your future, and they quietly start handing it to someone else." Gasps scattered through the room like firecrackers. I turned to her. "Lena, you've been laughing with him behind my back. You thought I didn't know, but I did. And I watched it all unfold. Not out of hatred, but because I wanted to understand what kind of person you really were." She opened her mouth to speak, but nothing came out. I raised the necklace box I had placed on the table that night at the other party. "I brought this for you weeks ago. Thought maybe we had a chance. But I realized now you chose your chance with him." And then I handed the box not to her but to Lisa. "Sell it, donate it, or melt it down. Doesn't matter anymore." The silence in the room was thunderous. And then finally, Lena found her voice. "You ambushed me," she said, breathless. "No," I replied. "You ambushed us. You just never thought I'd bring an audience." Carson tried to leave, but Eli, who had quietly stepped into the room just minutes earlier, stood by the door. "Not yet," Eli said calmly. "We're not done here." There was more, much more. And I was about to reveal something Lena never saw coming. The tension was suffocating, like a storm that refused to break. Lena's face had gone pale, but it was Carson who looked truly nervous now. He shifted from foot to foot, his arms crossed tight across his chest like they could shield him from what was coming. I could see it in his eyes. He'd been through this before, but something about tonight was different. This wasn't a panicked husband yelling in a hallway. This was measured, public, and deliberate. I reached under the bar counter and pulled out a large envelope. Thick, sealed. I held it in my hand for a moment, letting the weight of it settle on the room. Then I looked directly at her. "I wasn't sure if I'd ever use this," I said, "but now seems like the perfect time." She stared at it like it might explode. I handed it to her in front of everyone. "These are screenshots, messages, GPS logs, photos, copies of hotel invoices, dinner reservations for two. When you told me you were out with Lisa or covering shifts, you planned an entire shadow life and thought I'd be too blind or too trusting to notice. You were half right." She didn't open it. She couldn't. Instead, she shook her head, murmuring, "Why are you doing this in front of everyone? Because they deserve to know who you are and maybe more importantly, who I really am, too. Not a doormat. Not a fool. Not the guy who got walked over without ever raising his voice." Carson interrupted. "All right, this is getting out of hand. Sit down," I said calmly without even looking at him. "You've done enough." Eli stepped forward again, now holding a small black USB stick. "You know what this is?" he asked, looking directly at Carson. "It's from the security camera at the Lakeview Inn. The front desk clerk is my cousin. You really should be more careful about where you conduct your affairs. People were whispering now. Lisa's mouth hung open. Theo just shook his head slowly. This wasn't just drama anymore. This was something cinematic. Real. A betrayal unraveling in real time. Lena clutched the envelope, her knuckles white. I can explain. I cut her off. Don't. You've already explained everything in those texts. He doesn't excite me anymore. I feel alive when I'm with you. I think I'll leave him soon, but I need to do it on my terms. You had your terms. I'm making mine now. I turned toward the guests. I'm sorry to make this night about us, but this was never just about me. It's about what people tolerate in silence. It's about dignity, and finally taking it back. I walked over to the kitchen counter and picked up a folder labeled Final. Inside was a divorce agreement already reviewed by my lawyer. I held it out and laid it gently on the table between us. I'm not going to yell. I'm not going to beg. I'm just going to walk away because for the first time in months, I'm not confused. I'm not second-guessing myself. I see everything clearly now, and I know exactly what kind of life I won't live anymore. Carson started toward the door. Screw this. I'm out. Eli stepped aside to let him pass, but not before slipping him a business card. In case any of the other husbands want to reach you, he said. You've got quite the resume. He didn't respond. He left with his head down without looking back. Lena, though, just stood there alone. No one offered her comfort. No one ran to her side. She opened the envelope and skimmed the top few pages. The color drained from her face as the reality of what she'd done and how thoroughly I'd uncovered it hit her. She looked up at me, voice small now. Is this really it? I nodded. Yeah, this is it. She sat down in one of the dining chairs, stunned, and I turned toward the guests. Thanks for coming, I said. Enjoy the wine. The food's still warm. I'm going to get some air. And then, without another glance, I stepped outside into the night. But this wasn't the end of the story. There was still something she didn't know. Something no one in that room knew. Because 2 days earlier, I found something in her closet that changed everything again. Something that wasn't meant for me to see. 2 days before the party, I was looking for an old photo album. That's all. It was supposed to be something innocent. I needed a picture for a framed gift I'd planned on giving my mother. And I remembered stashing the album in the hallway closet last year, buried under winter coats and boxes of mismatched junk. It was supposed to be a 2-minute detour. But then I saw it, a shoebox. Not an old one either. Brand new, like it had just come from the store. It didn't have a label, no scuffs, no dust, just clean white cardboard. It didn't belong there. And it wasn't hidden well, just lazily tucked behind a basket of scarves like she thought I'd never care enough to look. I pulled it out and felt a heaviness I couldn't explain. I didn't want to open it. I didn't even know what I expected to find. But some part of me already knew it wasn't just receipts or old notes. It was something deliberate. Inside was a tangle of secrets. Letters, photos, a small black notebook, airline receipts, foreign currency, euros and pesos, and the worst of it, a key card from a hotel in Miami, dated 3 months ago. The same week, she told me she was at a wellness conference for her job. She had even come back with fake brochures in her luggage like a prop from a school play. I opened the notebook and my stomach turned. It wasn't a diary. It was a plan. Page after page of scribbled notes. How she'd split assets, what she'd tell her family. Even a checklist of hard conversations she needed to have, including one that said, talk to Jack about moving out after I tell Eric. Jack. Carson wasn't even her only secret. That one name, underlined twice, blew a hole through everything I thought I had uncovered. Who the hell was Jack? There wasn't a single photo of him in the stack, but there was one phone screenshot saved at the bottom of the box. It was a thread of messages. Not between her and Carson, but between her and him. The messages were blunt, intense, passionate. Jack, he'll break. You know he's not built for betrayal. Her. That's what I'm counting on. I froze reading that. There was something ice cold about it. Not guilt, not hesitation, strategy. I sat there holding this box full of bombs, and I suddenly realized the affair with Carson was just the surface. The real rot ran deeper. Maybe she was using Carson as a decoy. Maybe Jack was the real endgame. I didn't know yet, but I knew one thing. If she thought she was orchestrating some grand exit while I stood there like a confused extra in her soap opera, she had underestimated the wrong man. I copied everything, scanned the documents, photographed each note, and even recorded a video of myself opening the box just in case she tried to claim it was planted. Then I sealed it back, returned it exactly where I found it, and never mentioned a word. I was done confronting her directly. I wasn't interested in her lies anymore. I wanted her to feel something worse than guilt. I wanted her to feel exposed. And that's why the morning after the party, I sent the envelope again. This time, not to her, but to 3 key people: her manager, her sister Ava, and her best friend Nicole. I didn't include angry rants or explanations. I simply wrote, "In case you're wondering why she's not coming back from this." But I wasn't done. I needed to know who Jack was. And more importantly, I needed to know what exactly she had been counting on. Because it sure as hell wasn't just a fling with some sleazy realtor. I called Eli again and told him about the box, about the second man, about the plan that included my destruction like it was a to-do list. He went quiet on the other end of the line, then finally said, "All right, we dig deeper. But if this guy's the one pulling strings, we're not just talking about infidelity anymore. This feels orchestrated, cold." "Exactly," I said. "She didn't just betray me emotionally. She prepared to destroy me. And she wrote it down like it was nothing." For the first time since this entire nightmare began, I didn't feel broken. I felt ready. What Lena didn't know was that while she was laughing with her lover, I was writing the last chapter of her performance. And Jack, whoever he was about to be dragged into the light. I didn't have to wait long. Eli's skills were sharp. And within 48 hours, I had a name, a face, and a timeline. Jack Barrett, 45 years old, former law school classmate of Lena's, twice divorced, current VP of a strategic consulting firm in Chicago. No social media, no public photos, almost nothing online deliberately. The kind of man who operated quietly behind curtains, surrounded by people who didn't ask questions. But Eli wasn't most people. Jack had flown into our city 6 times in the past 4 months. Every visit aligned with either a work trip Lena claimed she had or an argument she manufactured. The kind of fights that seemed to come out of nowhere and ended with her grabbing a bag and storming off to her mother's or an emergency team meeting. I remember those nights vividly, sitting on the couch, staring at the dark screen of the TV, trying to figure out where we went wrong, thinking maybe I wasn't good enough, maybe I hadn't listened, maybe I hadn't loved her the right way. Turns out I was just playing the role she'd written for me, the loyal, clueless husband. But I wasn't clueless anymore. Eli traced Jack to a high-rise condo across the bridge. He wasn't just visiting. He lived here part-time. The address was listed under a holding company, but the trail led straight to him. Lena had been there at least twice. One security guard recognized her photo and said she'd been that guy's frequent guest. Nice lady, always brought wine. I wanted to throw something when I heard that. The wine detail felt too specific, too intimate. It reminded me of how we used to unwind after long days. But now I wondered how many bottles she'd shared with him, how many toasts, how many lies. What was worse was what came next. Eli sent me footage. It was grainy, shot from across the street. But there they were, Lena and Jack, walking side by side into the building at 11:43 p.m. She wore that gray coat I bought her for Christmas last year. The one she said she'd only wear on special nights. He was in a black overcoat carrying a suitcase. But it wasn't the walk that gutted me. It was the moment before they entered the building when she reached up and adjusted his collar, smiling up at him like they'd done it 1,000 times, like they belonged. And then she kissed him. Not fast, not stolen. Slow, intentional, as if sealing a promise. I stared at the screen for minutes after the video ended. My fists clenched so tightly, I thought I might snap something. It wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was strategy. She had built an entire off-ramp from her life. She was already walking it. I had just been left holding the blueprint of a demolition. But something didn't make sense. If Jack was her future, what was Carson? A distraction? A test run? Or maybe he was never meant to last. Just a place to hide the real secret behind. A decoy affair to keep me from discovering the deeper one. I confronted none of them. I spoke to no one, not even Eli. Instead, I started planning my exit with precision. I withdrew half our joint savings, the amount I was legally entitled to. I canceled shared subscriptions, severed connections to everything with my name attached. I opened a new bank account. Quietly, carefully, I removed my name from the lease on her car. I forwarded my mail. Bit by bit, I erased myself from the life she thought she controlled. And then I booked a flight, not to run, but to disappear from her narrative. She wanted to write me as the weak one, the man she'd outgrown. I was going to rewrite the ending in ink so bold she'd never forget it. I left the house early on a Sunday morning. She was still asleep. I didn't pack much, just what mattered. My documents, my laptop, a copy of the divorce papers. But before I closed the front door, I left a letter. Not dramatic, just a truth bomb wrapped in silence. Lena, I saw the red dress. I heard the laugh. I found the notebook. I know about Jack. I know everything. By the time you read this, I'll be somewhere you never thought I'd go. Beyond you. Don't call. This story isn't yours anymore. And just like that, I was gone. But the story wasn't finished because 2 weeks later, I got a message I never expected from Jack himself. And what he told me changed everything again. The message came late. A blocked number. No name, just a cold, clinical text that popped up on my new phone at 2:12 a.m. You don't know the full story. If you want the truth about Lena, meet me. 9 p.m. Tuesday, 103 East Bridge level. Come alone. I stared at it in disbelief. I was thousands of miles from her now, living in a modest rental near the coast, off-grid enough that even Eli didn't know my precise location. I'd vanished cleanly, deliberately. The only person who might have connected dots was her. But this wasn't her tone. This was something else, something calculating. It had to be Jack. At first, I considered deleting it, blocking it, letting it rot unread. But curiosity has a voice louder than bitterness. If he wanted to talk, it meant there was something Lena hadn't told him either, or something he had just realized far too late. Either way, I needed to know what he thought was worth risking contact. I flew back under an alias and kept my movements quiet. Wore a hoodie, hat, sunglasses. I wasn't paranoid, I was cautious. After everything Lena had planned, I didn't trust anyone who operated in her orbit. Eli offered to come with me, but I declined. I needed Jack to feel I was vulnerable, alone, just like he and Lena probably imagined me from the start. The address he sent led me to an unfinished luxury apartment complex under construction, still wrapped in scaffolding and raw drywall. Not the kind of place you'd expect a confession, but maybe that was the point. Quiet, untraceable, forgotten. He was already there when I arrived, leaning against a concrete pillar, cigarette in hand, face sharp and clean-shaven. He looked like someone who didn't need to introduce himself. Someone used to controlling every room he stepped into. "Eric," he said simply, flicking the cigarette away. "Jack," I replied. No handshake, no smile, just tension. "I figured you'd come." "I almost didn't. But you did. That tells me you want the same thing I do. Clarity." I stared at him for a long moment. "You slept with my wife. What kind of clarity do you think I'm after?" He took a breath, crossed his arms. "She told me you were emotionally unstable, that you'd stopped caring, that you checked out of the marriage long ago. First, I believed her. She played the victim well. Then I started noticing things that didn't add up." "Like what?" "She lied to me," he said. "About Carson. Said he was an old friend. That she only leaned on him during your bad spells. Then I found a receipt from a hotel she visited with him 2 nights after she told me she was with you at a couple's retreat. So I followed her once. I didn't move, didn't blink, just listened. She didn't know I was in town. I watched her meet another man at a bar, kiss him, then leave with him in a taxi. Different guy, not Carson, not me, someone else entirely. That's when I realized I wasn't the exception. I was just one of many. I swallowed hard, a bitter taste rising in my throat. She was grooming all of us, setting up backup plans for her backup plans. He nodded. That notebook you found, that wasn't just a fantasy. It was a map. She's done this before. Once in grad school and once with her second fiancé before you. I tracked them down. Same pattern. She builds trust, creates drama to provoke distance, and then weaponizes pity and intimacy. She always has an exit and someone waiting with open arms. A part of me wanted to lash out, to scream that he should have known better. But then I realized he was just as used as I was. The only difference was I married her. He continued, she's not just cheating. She's a manipulator, a psychological arsonist. She lights fires and walks away while the people who loved her burn. I stepped closer. So why message me? He looked away. Because I think she's planning something worse. I found an old flash drive in her bag. There were files, spreadsheets, names, insurance policies, even a fake account under your name. There's money missing. Like she was setting you up to take the fall for something. My blood ran cold. What kind of something? I don't know yet, but she's scared now. She thought you'd collapse, disappear in shame. She didn't expect you to leave clean. That makes you dangerous to her. I turned and looked out over the city skyline. She doesn't know where I am. Maybe not. But if she feels cornered, she'll find a way. I took a breath and faced him again. So what now? Jack handed me a second USB drive. Everything I copied. Take it and don't trust anyone connected to her. He turned and began walking away. Jack! I called after him. He paused. Why tell me all this? He looked over his shoulder, his eyes suddenly tired. Because we're not enemies. We're just survivors. And then he vanished down the stairwell, leaving me with the weight of a truth I hadn't even begun to understand. I returned to my hideaway, plugged in the drive, and watched as file after file loaded. Emails, audio recordings, even legal documents forged with my name. Lena hadn't just cheated. She was preparing to erase me. But now I was preparing something of my own, and it would be the last move she never saw coming. I spent 3 days in isolation with that flash drive, reading every line, listening to every file. What Jack had found wasn't just a betrayal. It was a blueprint for erasure. Lena had set up an elaborate scheme to drain our accounts, plant false evidence of tax fraud under my name, and then disappear clean. She would have emerged months later looking like the devastated widow of a man who vanished after a mental breakdown, collecting sympathy and likely my assets. But she didn't count on two things: Jack's conscience and my resilience. After everything, I realized I wasn't just some broken husband trying to figure out where it all went wrong. I was a survivor of psychological warfare. And now I had what she didn't. Proof. Not just of infidelity, but of intent, fraud, deception, and full-scale manipulation. I could have destroyed her publicly. I could have sent the files to every contact she had, posted them on forums, exposed her to the world. But I didn't. That would have kept me tied to her chaos, and I was done living in her gravity. Instead, I did something quieter, smarter. I contacted a lawyer, one of the best in the state, with expertise in high-conflict divorces involving financial deceit. We built a case. We filed quietly. We froze accounts. We preserved digital evidence with airtight timestamps. Within 2 weeks, she was served with everything: divorce papers, legal motions, forensic audit demands, all without a single phone call from me. Lena tried to reach me, of course. She sent emails laced with fake confusion, voicemails crying, "Why are you doing this to me? We can fix this. It's not what it looks like." But the silence she had weaponized against me for months, I now turned back on her, not with cruelty, but with peace. I wasn't her puppet anymore, and she knew it. When the divorce hearing came, she was a shell of herself. Not the smirking woman in the red dress, not the planner with the private notebook, just a woman cornered by her own lies, watching a man she once underestimated walk away completely untouchable. The court granted me everything I asked for: my full share of assets, a permanent restraining order, and full legal clearance of all the false accounts she had set up in my name. Her reputation didn't survive the process, but that was no longer my concern. I disappeared again after the final hearing. But this time it wasn't running. It was freedom. I moved to a coastal town I'd visited once with my father when I was a teenager. Bought a small house with big windows and ocean air. Started taking photos again, something I used to love before I got too busy being someone else's emotional caretaker. I took up sailing, learned how to cook things that didn't come in a box. I stopped waking up with anxiety and started sleeping through the night. And then 6 months later, something unexpected happened. At a little cafe by the harbor, I met someone. Her name was Marin. She wasn't flashy or loud. She didn't try to impress me or tell me how I should feel. She just saw me. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I had to earn someone's love. I told her the truth eventually, not all the ugly details, but the outline. She listened, held my hand, and said, "You didn't survive it. You escaped it. That matters." And she was right. I had spent so long thinking the story ended with betrayal, but it didn't. The story ended with me standing tall, unbroken, and free. And Lena, she became nothing more than a cautionary tale I no longer had to carry. Because healing doesn't come with revenge. It comes with peace. And I finally found mine.